I'm Dylan Ryals Hamilton. Thank you for coming here. I am just coming here from a long day of setting boulders with a two-man crew. One guy running a machine and one guy setting the boulders. And I wasn't the guy running the machine, so please forgive me if I get a little draggy. It's been a long day. I was eating a lot of dust, and so my mouth is really dry, so I'm having beer. I guess I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to be here. I was basically a career landscaper. Been working in the landscape industry since almost right out of high school. And I started working, I had the amazing, just amazing, fortuitous, I was really lucky to begin this work with an organization, a business called Native Nurseries of Tallahassee, in Tallahassee, Florida, where I grew up. And they focused on native, non-invasive species and wildlife support. We did a lot of bird gardens and butterfly gardens and things like that. And this was a business that was founded by a married couple who both had degrees in wildlife ecology. And they started a native nursery. And I started working with them in their landscape crew. And we did all kinds of amazing projects down there. It was a really great organization to work for. I was constantly getting educated on different bird species and bird calls and wildlife trivia of all sorts, and just really thought that was really lovely. I had an amazing experience. Worked there for about 2 years, and then decided it was time to leave my hometown. And I moved up here to Asheville, North Carolina, where everything was supposed to be so much more progressive and forward-thinking. And I got one job after another job after another job working for landscape companies, because I thought, wow, I really love this. This is really fun. I'm going to keep doing landscaping. Because I didn't realize at that time that landscaping doesn't usually mean that you get to work in the woods planting native species, that are supporting birds and butterflies and other wildlife habitat. And so I came up here and went from one job to another job to another job, laying sod and planting thousands of daylilies and hundreds of crepe myrtles and billions of this and that, all in big rows, and it just really felt wrong. It felt like what we were doing was coming into this completely devastated, almost desertified landscape. And this is what we do when we build houses now, especially in big developments where they're building many houses in one place. We come in, we cut down all the trees, we scrape out all the topsoil, we ship that off to a yard, we build a house, we drive machines all over everything, compacting the soil everywhere, and then we install these very sterile, ornamental landscapes that are useful for absolutely nothing except looking pretty, right? And I saw this immense amount of resource, lots of money being spent, lots of limited mineral resources being used, just immense amounts of resources being poured into something that really has no output, doesn't give you anything back. And I thought that was a little backwards, seemed a little twisted. And so because of that, I actually went through a period of depression and a little bit of identity crisis. Like, what am I doing in the world? Why am I doing this? This is the way I have to make my living now? And that felt strange and bad and uncomfortable. And because of that discomfort, I stumbled upon the science, the design system known as permaculture. And permaculture is a design system for creating sustainable human settlements. It's sustainable systems thinking. Another way to put it is permaculture is applied common sense, because it's basically taking modern technology and ancient indigenous wisdom and combining those into systems theory, looking at the whole thing. Not just we need to install a landscape that looks nice, but we need to install a landscape that provides multiple yields, provides for multiple different human needs, and perhaps ecological needs, and sustains and supports the ecosystem within which that particular landscape exists. My mouth is dry. I'm going to drink some beer. So, permaculture is kind of it's a whole systems thinking. It's whole systems design, and there's so much to it. I could sit here and talk to you for like probably 10 days straight. Do you have time? I could talk to you forever about what permaculture is, but it's based on a system of it's rooted in ethics. So the ethics are care for the earth first, care for people, and redistribute the surplus or fair shares. So earth care, people care, fair share. If you want an easy way to remember that. And there's a big important reason that earth care comes before people care. Can anyone venture a guess as to why care for the earth is first and care for people is second?
No earth, no people.
No earth, no people. Earth is primary. We depend upon it. We cannot survive as a species on this planet if the entire global ecosystem is in fragments. We can't do it. So earth care comes first and people care comes second. Because you don't have any people to care for if there isn't an earth. And then we look at, okay, now that we're at the level of people care, we can take care of the people. Now how can we create enough surplus that we can share and give it out and give something back? And by this is the way ecosystems work, by having a little bit of something extra to give over here and supporting these other people or this other bit of ecosystem, then those have something to give back in turn, right? So permaculture is rooted in ethics, earth care, people care, fair share, and it's also based on a set of principles. And this is where the applied common sense comes in. The permaculture principles are just as basic common sense as it gets. We have principles like multiple functions. Like, don't bring anything into your system that doesn't have at least 2 or 3 or 4 different functions. For example, bringing chickens into a homestead system. We're not just bringing chickens in and feeding them grain because chickens give us eggs. Because if you're looking at it on that level, you're bringing a whole lot of grain in and you're getting eggs that are way more expensive than what you buy at the grocery store when you add up all the grain that you're feeding the chickens. And actually, grain isn't very healthy for chickens anyway. And getting the eggs back that you get from that amount of grain, you're paying way more than the $3.50 to $5 for a dozen organic eggs. So you bring the chickens in not only because they supply eggs, but also because they supply a tilling service, because they scratch. That's a natural behavior of chickens. They scratch the dirt looking for insects. They provide insect control, because that's a natural behavior of chickens. In fact, they wouldn't choose to eat grain mostly. They would choose to eat more insects than anything else. They provide a service in the form of fertilizer because they drop manure. They also provide meat, feathers, all these other things. So we're trying to break outside of the dualistic, this is for this and that's for that and this is good and this is bad, and bring it, kind of wrap it all up. Permaculture is try to create closed loop systems, whole systems. Tie everything in together. Everything is feeding something else. That's a little bit about permaculture. from permaculture came the transition movement. A man named Hopkins in the United Kingdom, back in the early 2000s, was teaching a permaculture design course and had somebody come in and talk about climate change. And he had his class watch a video about peak oil and peak fossil fuels and resource extraction and all that. And they came up against some pretty devastating, hard-hitting, kind of brick wall, oh no, what are we going to do now? Like, we're totally screwed kind of stuff, like big issues. And you can look into those things on your own time, and maybe you can recognize that the global economy is incredibly fragile, and yet we're all dependent upon it, right? So he was teaching this permaculture class and came up against all these issues and was totally devastated and paralyzed. But permaculturalists have this kind of mentality where we tend to view problems as solutions. When we come up against a problem, we see that this problem inherently feeds or is related to multiple different solutions, maybe for other things, or maybe even for the solution to that inherent problem. So you have a major tick infestation or a plague of locusts or something, bring in guinea hens. Guinea hens love ticks. They're famous for it, right? So you have this problem that is ticks, you bring in guinea hens, now you have a solution, because the ticks are the solution to your guinea hen feed problem. So, because permaculturalists are good at turning problems into solutions, this man, Hopkins, who was teaching this class that came up against these issues, hit this brick wall, felt really paralyzed by the global weight of everything coming down on them. He turned to his class and said, create an energy descent plan for your town. And they did. And they presented it to the town council. And the town council adopted it as their official city plan. And then he moved on to another town, proceeded to work harder to engage the entire community, not just the students who were coming in and saying, here's our report on what your town should do, which the community didn't have a lot of buy-in for. Created a model, basically, for communities to work at a local scale, small groups of people working together to find the solutions, create the solutions to all of these big issues. I'm going to take another sip of beer.
You don't have to. Please keep announcing it.
In front of the Asheville sign, it could be promotional.
Yeah, turn it a little bit.
Yeah, turn it a little
It is highlight.
There you go.
So permaculture is rooted in ecology and ecosystem understanding. And a really important ecological concept, I think, is the concept of succession. The concept of succession refers to an ecosystem's ability or the tendency for an ecosystem to revive after a disturbance. And there's a couple different definitions I can throw in here. But, a disturbance could be anything from an invasive species coming in, to logging, to a wildfire, to a volcanic eruption that covers everything in molten rock. And in the case of the volcanic eruption that covers everything in molten rock, or say like a major landslide that takes away half of a mountain or something like that, we would refer to that as primary succession. Because there's absolutely no living thing left when something like that happens. Volcanic eruption occurs, everything's covered in molten rock. There's no seed bank left. There are no roots, there are no seedlings, there's nothing there. So primary succession means that it's just the lichens and the mosses at first that first move in and start breaking down a little bit of rock and turning it into a little bit of topsoil. And allowing that topsoil, just a little pocket of topsoil, to hopefully catch some wind-blown, squirrel-dropped, bird-dropped seed that comes in and starts rooting out and becomes a small tree and creates a little bit of shade. And that sets the stage for the next stage of succession, the next chapter, the next row of living things comes in and can now establish root and establish a presence there. And eventually, it takes a very long time, but eventually that rock with lichens and mosses becomes a forest or a forested mountain. I think this is a really useful metaphor for the place that we are at in human culture, in human society, in a lot of ways. Tomorrow, I am going down to work on a project down in Polk County called Grow Healthy Food Where People Live. Grow Food Where People Live. We're working at a low-income housing project with folks that are basically in primary succession, culturally speaking. Some of these people don't own pots and pans because every meal that they know how to cook comes out of a microwave. So that's the primary succession, culturally speaking. And I'm not saying that these people there's anything wrong with them. It's not their fault. This is where they're at. They have lost the last couple of generations of cultural knowledge and wisdom, including how to cook a meal starting with fresh vegetables. And that's where we're at in a lot of places. But I'm really here to talk about Asheville in transition. I think Asheville is a little bit ahead of the game compared to a lot of places. We still, trust me, I work sometimes for a landscaping company that does the landscapes for the $600,000 house built by a contractor for somebody who hasn't even seen it before they fly in to move in from somewhere else. And so we don't have a necessarily rich cultural topsoil in all places, but we do have a pretty strong foundation, I think, for recognizing where we are, where we've come from, where we could be going, where we want to go. We're in a pretty good place. There's a lot of cultural awareness here. We have the Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council that's doing a lot of amazing work, just helping on so many different levels. I won't even start trying to say what they do. If you want to give it an elevator speech, then go for it. But I mean, it's just from land use to access to all these different food policy issues. How can we get people more connected with their food? Recognizing the importance of connecting with their food. Recognizing we don't actually know in most cases where our food even comes from. They're doing great work. We have Transition Asheville. I mentioned the transition movement earlier about this guy that was teaching a permaculture class and challenged students to create an energy descent plan. Well, that whole thing turned into a movement that has spread globally and virally. And there are thousands of communities worldwide that are doing that same kind of work, basically coming with permaculture principles. What can we do in our community? How can we engage our community? Working at a really human scale, really small scale, to confront these challenges. And what you find when you start looking at any of these issues is that you can't just like telescope it and go, okay, there's the issue and that's the thing, that's the problem that we need to work on, without recognizing that it's connected to this whole huge system. That's all these different influencing factors, all these different elements, they're all tied in together. They're all influencing each other. You can't just pinpoint one thing. And I think the pesticide issue is like that. You know, we can't just come in and say, we gotta eliminate pesticides. Because first of all, like, you know, what's your definition and how, you know, what do you mean by pesticide? Like effective microorganisms, Roundup, you know, there's a whole spectrum there. We can't take the whole thing away, because then you're limited to, and then pesticide is like picking all the little tiny aphids off your tomato plants one at a time, right? And we know that's ludicrous. We know that we can use integrated pest management. We can, you know, encourage predatory insects. We can encourage ladybugs. We can encourage wasps. All these different kinds of things. We have to look at the whole thing as an interconnected web. And there are so many solutions that lie unseen or unnoticed as the solutions to our problems. But we have to tie it all together. So, as a permaculture teacher, I could tell you about all these different methods for controlling weeds, weed plants. Use cardboard. Throw down cardboard, throw mulch on top of it. Maybe even throw some organic matter in there, and that even becomes its own new garden bed. You know, so here we have this weed-infested area. We can chop that all down, throw some cardboard down, throw some manure down, throw some mulch on top of it. Now, instead of this big weed-infested area, we have a garden bed. There's so many different ways. Cardboard is like totally underutilized resource. We have dumpsters all over the place that say, have these stickers that explicitly limit them as cardboard only. And yet, it's all getting shipped away, often to China, where they're going and recycling it, turning it, pulping it, turning it into paper, newspaper, more cardboard. I don't know what they do with it over there. We have so many different waste streams, and so many of these waste streams are solutions to our intrinsic problems, these systemic issues that we have. Another thing I'd like to talk about is just like our concept of, so when we're talking about pesticides, like what is a pest? And what makes it a pest? Is it a pest because it's irritating, or is it a pest because it's blown completely out of control? Because if there's a population of any living thing that's blown completely out of control, that is not a natural phenomenon. I mean, maybe sometimes, sort of, in really specific, extreme circumstances. But ecosystems have a way of regulating themselves and limiting the number of species, the number of the population of any particular species, because things are going to come in and feed on it, and things are going to come in and parasitize it, and eventually it's going to reach a limit in terms of its food supply. And so if we have something that's just like, oh goodness, this is totally out of control, we can't, what do we do about this? Then we probably need to take like 3 steps backward and rethink how we even got to that place. Why is this particular insect or pest such a big issue? How did that happen in the first place? So, and then of course we can, then go back and say, okay, well, we have this crazy invasive weed issue, And that's because we disturbed this area at the time when that particular weed was blowing its seeds, or we disturbed this area and just left it there and didn't have a conscious plan as to how we were going to come back and revitalize the ecosystem. And so who shows up? The invasive species, the weeds, all the things that have evolved to survive in barren, or disturbed soil. And most of the things that we call weeds are things that evolve to thrive in soil that has been disturbed, by and large. Or things that have evolved to thrive in soil that's really nutrient dense and disturbed. I'm talking about like chickweed. You know about chickweed? Thrives in garden soils. Disturbed, tilled, chopped up, given seeds, a chance to get themselves going, but like really nutrient rich. But chickweed is a great example of like my next point, which is how do we define pests? Something that's irritating or a problem? So many of the things we consider pests are actually a solution lying inherently, intrinsically within the problem itself. Chickweed being a great example because chickweed is delicious. Lots of people find it really irritating, but it makes great pesto. It's great in salads.
Good stuff.
It makes great salve. Thank you, Gabby. It's just, and then how about dandelion? That's the classic example of a weed that we basically declared war against. We said, we got to get rid of all the dandelions. That worked out really well, right? Here we are now.
Super successful.
But I don't mind dandelions. Honestly, one of the happiest times of the year for me is when the lawn just starts growing back and it's just starting to look green, and then all these beautiful yellow flowers pop out everywhere. And then the violets come in right after that. All these little specks of purple sprinkled out between all the big yellow dandelion plumes, or dandelion blooms. And then the buttercups come along. And it's like, what's wrong with having a lawn filled with color? Anybody got an argument against that?
It's just when they go to seed and then my lawn looks like it's a crack house there.
Like there's a crack house.
But that's because we define that as failure. Right? I didn't mean we define the crack house as failure, but we do, but I meant like the lawn on the dandelion, so maybe that's another level.
2 foot tall dandelions gone to seed. Not my idea. Beautiful.
Right, but they pop up before you even get a chance to mow 'em. Gosh darn it. So then I have to start asking the question, like, why is this lawn thing even a thing?
Yeah.
What's that for?
Rich people.
I understand that it's great to have a place for children to throw a ball or chase each other around or, what have you. I think lawns are great. I think every neighborhood should have one. But here we are in southern Appalachia in a forested mountain range. We live in a forest. So why are we trying to turn all this forest into one little grassy square? Do we really have to have one for everybody? This whole concept comes from European nobility setting aside land just for ornamental purposes in order to make the personal statement that I am of such high status and I have such wealth that I don't have to grow food right here. I can just make it pretty. On a community scale, I think that's a beautiful idea, a beautiful concept. On an individual scale, I think that's just a little kind of, It's kind of big-headed. Like, why do I need my own personal bit of space to prove, it's like building a house that's 10 times the size that you need. It's like just doing it for status purposes. So, when it comes to pesticides and the approach to pests, I think there's just such an incredible systems rethink that needs to happen for us to really get when is it appropriate to even label something as a pest. And after that, when is it appropriate to treat it as a pest, and to what degree and what scale. And then when is it appropriate to bring in a toxic legacy that's going to affect generations of humans and non-humans to come down the line. I think education and kind of like re-education, like let's get over this superimposed European kind of mindset, which actually came from a pretty drastically different ecosystem to here. Like, how can we use that where it's useful, but also learn how to look beyond our preconceptions, look beyond what has become culturalized, and reculturalize a new paradigm, a new way of thinking about it, a new approach to viewing humans as being intricately linked, as denizens, as one element in the ecosystems that we inhabit. We're just one species here. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on all around us, and we don't even really understand it all yet. So how can we come in and say, we're going to create this European lifestyle with a nobility-influenced aesthetic on every piece of landscape and make this everyone's house? Just, if I could get you to close your eyes with me for just a minute and just imagine what your home, your yard, your neighborhood, your community, your whole village, city could look like if everybody was thinking a few generations ahead, if everybody was intentional about their resource use, if everybody planted a couple of trees that produce some kind of food, fruit, nuts, berries. If everybody did that now, if every single person planted 1 or 2 trees, each of those 1 or 2 trees, in a matter of a decade or 2, could be producing enough food, hundreds of pounds of food per season. If we could share all of that abundance, everybody would have more than they needed. And there would be no need for Gabby and Randall and myself to go down to Polk County tomorrow and plan a foodscape and a housing project. Because it would already be there. And everybody would already have more than they needed. When we can rethink our relationship with our landscapes, with our homes, with our ecosystems, I think we can find ourselves in a community that is in transition. Thanks, y'all.